In our last episode, we interviewed Michael Letts. Michael Letts is a longtime 30-year law enforcement veteran, someone who runs a nonprofit called Invest USA, where they provide bulletproof vests to law enforcement around the world. And he's also a consultant and in close communication with the White House on law enforcement. In that interview, Michael told us that the Trump administration will be going to troubled cities with federal forces. They will not be there permanently. They will leave when the crime rates in those up in those difficult cities reduces. And that was opposite of what the mainstream media had been telling us prior to that. Now, with crime dropping in Washington, D.C., with a with Governor Pritzker of Illinois telling Trump not to come to Chicago, but Governor Newsom saying don't come to California. What is going to happen next? Is it is the Trump administration going to bring in federal forces like we were told in our last interview? Let's welcome back to the show Michael Letts. Michael, good to see you again. You were on the phone with the president earlier today talking about this whole issue. What can you tell us?
Well, it's very simple, Rick. We have known for some time that this was the only way to get the job done. And why do we say that? I was just on a debate on a national news network show yesterday with the some of the minority communities that were involved with this, and they were expressing some of their concerns. We have said very clearly from day one that we are not making this a military country, a military state, a dictatorship. Never has been our intent. And so the question was raised, why would you even consider the National Guard to begin with? Let's set the stage, Rick. 4 years ago, when Joe Biden took office, we have roughly 1.4 million officers, sworn officers across the country. When Joe Biden left, now I'm going to tell you why we're fixing to give you this number in a second, because you remember you had defund the police, you had Black Lives Matter trying to say, we need to get rid of them. You had COVID saying if you didn't take the vaccine, you're automatically fired. You had so many elements. Plus, you had mainstream media. Let's just be frank, Rick. Mainstream media was trying to do everything they could to make law enforcement look bad, make it look like they didn't deserve any respect.
Oh, I
You should
agree.
not support them 100%.
Yeah.
That was the mindset. So, what was the end result after 4 years of Joe Biden? We were down to almost 700,000 officers. That's almost a 50% cut. Now,
Wow.
why is that important to say that on the air?
Yeah.
Because now understand here we're going into a new administration, the Trump administration. We all recognize that during the campaign, one of the main things in November was people were concerned about being safe. The Constitution guarantees us the right. What's in the preamble? We were supposed to defend the American people. Well, that defense wasn't just talking about from opposition across seas. It was talking about defending liberty and the safety of the American people wherever they may be, in whatever state, whatever situation they be in. That is part of what the Constitution guarantees. The president was determined to make sure we fulfilled our constitutional obligation. He ran on that. He was elected overwhelmingly by doing that. And so he said, how do we get this accomplished? We were very quick to point out you're not going to get it accomplished when you have cartels. We had open borders, you remember?
Yeah.
You have cartels, human sex traffickers, terrorist cells, networks, criminals from all across the world who have been let out just specifically to come here. We had so much crime in this country. There's no way you could do it with a 50% reduced law enforcement capacity to begin with. There's only one way. And this is the other argument point that we made with the administration. We're not talking about pickpocketers. We're talking about drug cartels who have better ordinances and better protection than most law enforcement agencies ever dreamed of having. We're talking about people that are not saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to be invited here. We'll leave and we'll come back whenever you call us to come back." No, these people were determined and bent on destroying our citizens, harming America, and trying to remove our freedoms and our safety. And so we knew they were going to be hard to get rid of. We didn't have the capacity to do it. So what was the solution? Mr. President, the Constitution makes you the commander in chief. Yes, Article 10 of the Constitution is there. Well, Article 10 simply means that we do not have armed forces on the streets for law enforcement purposes. Now, get this now. People misunderstand this. For law enforcement purposes. And what it meant by that is we're just patrolling the streets to catch speeders, whatever. Because in the Article 10 of the Constitution, it provides exceptions. And you think about the logic why our forefathers did this. You can't have armed service members patrolling the streets unless, and here comes the unless,
Mhm.
if for some reason we have an invasion, we have enemy combatants on our soil, who do you think is going to fight the enemy combatants? Yeah, of course, our law enforcement, but you think we have enough to come to fight? If back in World War II, if Germany had landed a whole division over here, do you think we would say, "Oh, we've got a Article 10, we can't bring the military to fight them, every man for himself"? Of course not. The Article 10 provides exceptions, and one of those was if there are enemy combatants. So what did the president do? Now, you may not like this, but let's just talk the logic. He said, okay, we have cartels who are enemy combatants, domestic terrorists, and why are we going to classify them as such? Because they are deliberately attempting bringing in fentanyl to kill our young people, to destroy as many of our armed service members. Because you remember, hey, that classification from 18 to 24 is where most of your military people enter into the service, and those are the ones that are being targeted with these drugs. So they are subverting and trying to destroy us. Yes, they're enemy combatants. Times have changed, Rick. You're not going to see any longer big landing crafts hitting our beaches with back then Soviet troops or Chinese troops are all rushing the beach. Those days are gone. They now figured out how to do it internally instead. That's what they did with making illegal crossings, coming in, infiltrated, and destroying us from within. But they're still doing the same purpose, and that's our destruction. So the president classified them as domestic terrorists, enemy combatants. So now, because you have all these enemy combatants and domestic terrorists that are in our country, on our soil, that gives him the ability to use, first of all, that first exception to bring in armed forces to combat those. Then the second provision that the Article 10 provides for is should the president deem a national emergency. Now, it gives a couple specifics, but it doesn't say that these are the only specifics. What are some of the specifics? If is a national emergency if you have a group, whatever they may be, Ku Klux Klan, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, whatever, that suddenly organize and say, we're going to try to overthrow the government. We're going to march in the streets. We're going to take over City Hall, whatever. That is a national emergency. Well, the president said you don't necessarily have them doing the marching in the streets, but you have them organizing. And how are they organizing? They're helping promote crime. They are destroying the inner workings of our government and our cities and our places and homes where people live. So, because of that, I'm declaring a national crime emergency in this country. And when you look at the numbers, how bad it had gotten, Rick, that certainly is a justification. So, both of those clauses allow him to do what he did, which is to say, okay, now that we have done that, I'm going to invoke and bring in the National Guard. He could have brought in active troops. He did in California, as you will recall, in LA. He brought in the Marines beside the National Guard, but he brought in the National Guard, put it into place. And how was his purpose behind that? It wasn't okay. Local law enforcement leave. National Guard's got it. Has your position now. No, what he did was very smart. He said, okay, let's just put a patrol of 10 people out. We'll have 7 of those people be National Guard, fully armed, able to defend themselves, but we'll put 3 local law enforcement with them so that when you come on a situation, the National Guard will just provide the presence of might. You know what it's like when you're standing there and there's 10 armed people around. You're probably not going to resist as much as you would if you thought it was a one-on-one. So we're going to give that presence of power, and then we're going to allow the locals to actually make the arrest and do what it is that they would normally do anyway. And it was exceptionally successful, Rick. So exceptional that you have minority communities all over the country. Chicago, Detroit, and all sending YouTube clips to the White House saying, "Don't stop there. Can you come over here? My town is just as bad, if not worse, than D.C. Don't forget about us." And so the president was very clear. He said, "Okay, to all the elected leaders in all these jurisdictions, Constitution provides for safety. That's one of the things that this Constitution does. So you're supposed to provide it. Do your job, and if you won't do your job, then we'll give you a fair warning. We will come in and we will." Well, how did these local elected leaders respond? Johnson in Chicago, Moore, the governor of Maryland, Pittsburgh, the governor of Illinois, Newsom, California, Best, LA. They said, yeah, right. You don't tell us what to do. We'll decide what we're going to do. And we think it's best to be soft on crime, to give these people a second chance, to show them that we can be unified, that we're going to help them further themselves. They've been deceived, Rick. These criminals have no interest in furthering themselves in providing some kind of provide positive outcome for the American people. They just want to rob, steal, and kill. That's all they've been trained to do. And so they continue that trend. The president finally said, had enough. What caused the president to finally say he's had enough? You will see in about the last 2 months, last 60 days, a trend, Rick, going to where it's getting to our young people. You saw the gang situations we had in Cincinnati.
Yeah,
And what has become the in thing with our young people? Attack innocent people, film it, get it on YouTube or someplace, get your 15 seconds of fame, and hey, then the next town wants to do the same thing. The president recognized young people are so vulnerable, especially since we have spent decades teaching them that there is no values, there is no faith, there is no authority, there's no respect for anything. They're exceptionally vulnerable now, and he was concerned that you would have a nationwide usage of our young people beginning to adopt this philosophy and just really create a pandemic, for lack of a better word, across the country. The final straw that broke the camel's back was it happened in D.C. the day before he came in and federalized our law enforcement. We had the plan in place. We knew what we were going to have to do. We just didn't know when. That night, Sunday night, you had 100 young people went down to by the docks, by the Navy Yard, and began to do what they've done in other cities: harass people, assault people, intimidate people. So they sent out law enforcement under the old regime, DC regime, and the 100 youth backed them down. They had to leave. Not the youth, law enforcement did, because their policies wouldn't allow them to engage. And the president finally said, okay, that's it. That's enough. We're going to deal with crime. We're going to deal with it now and effectively. That's when he federalized DC. That's when he began to bring in the troops. We knew that our plan was effective and we worked. Being blunt with you, Rick, I didn't even think it was going to be that big of a success, but it was. And now you've got the rest of the country asking for the same thing. Now, I just saw a survey where there's the mainstream media trying to downplay what we're talking against, saying, oh, well, yeah, but if you talk to Chicagoans, 50% of them don't want them to be there, 50% do. First of all, I've never seen the mainstream media accurate on any poll they do.
right.
Second of all, here's the position from an administration standpoint. We've demonstrated huge success. You got a better idea? Let me hear it. Put it into
Michael,
place.
I'm going to ask you to hold that thought right there. We're going to take a quick break.
You know what's interesting, Rick? Nobody says anything they have a better way of handling it. And we've already proven that this one works. So, to all the citizens in the United States listening to this show, we are determined to make you safe. We're determined to provide security once again because we think you have a constitutional right to it. We have demonstrated a plan that has been exceptionally successful. Nobody, not even mainstream media, can argue. You have a better plan? Please let us know. You don't? You can expect to see this plan implemented all across the country. The second thing that was raised to me by some of the personnel talking back to me was, well, you're only doing it in Democratic states or minority issues. No, here's exactly the position. We are going to where the crime is at. Now, unfortunately, the crime seems to be predominant in sanctuary cities or blue states or blue cities. But I promise you, if there's an issue in a red city, a red state will be there as well. We are not going after the political ideology. We're going after the criminal, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah. Do you anticipate? I would imagine you and the president anticipates a lawsuit from some of these blue state leaders.
Oh, there's no question that's already occurred. You've had California Newsom who filed that we were unconstitutional bringing in the guard. He got an activist judge to agree, but you notice that was just overturned. And it has been said no, the president has the authority to do that. Even though that happened in California, you had some activists in D.C. that have just filed a suit. Now, we think it's illegal for what you did here in D.C. I'm sure that will go the same way.
we expect everywhere we go. You say, what are the consequences of that? We get started, we start reducing crime. We may be held off for a day or two when a judge gives an injunction. But you remember how it's supposed to work with the Supreme Court told activist judges, you can no longer issue national injunctions. They're supposed to be outlawed. They're supposed to be illegal. Now, here's the problem with what the Supreme Court did. They told their cohorts in the appeals courts and in the district judges, you can't do that, but they didn't give them a consequence. So what is happening now? You're still having these activist judges issuing the same injunctions, not fearing any retribution because the Supreme Court didn't do it the first time. So that leaves the administration. What do we do? Do we just say, okay, you're ignoring what the Supreme Court said, we're going to ignore you and do it anyway? Do we, which is what we're doing now, do we run back to the Supreme Court and say, hey, they didn't get your message, you want to send it to them again? And that's unfortunate we would have to do that, but that is a path that we're trying to do this to give it an appearance that we're trying to make sure we abide by every law, including we have some discussion about is it time to start reviewing and start removing the National Guard from D.C. Because even though some logic would tell you, well, if it's so successful, keep it as long as possible so that you don't, just like when you take an antibiotic, it kills it for the first few days, but you take it for a few days after to make sure it doesn't come back. Same principle. But the president is so concerned to make sure that those who have feared that we were making this a dictatorship or a military state, we proved them the opposite. We're actually going to cut back earlier than we anticipated. And I understand his point in doing that.
Michael, you brought up a lot of outstanding points here. And unfortunately, it's points I don't hear the president making, let alone the media. For example, as you pointed out, the number of law enforcement went from 1.2 million members down to 700,000 during the Biden administration under the defund the police movement.
Right.
It would seem to me that would be one of the first points the president would make when it comes to setting in a National Guard, as well as just letting the public know, hey, this is where we are. Your reaction to that?
Well, no, you're exactly right. I mentioned this debate, national debate I was in yesterday, and there were a couple of black officers, and of course the black hosts that were talking, said, you don't agree with him about the National Guard, do you? And they looked at him and they said, yes, we do, and here's why. Because he's been very clear, it's not a permanent solution. We are understaffed, underfunded. We're actually behind the eight ball, and we're going to need some help to get things back on a level playing field. And then, of course, he's been very clear. Once we're on a level playing field, they back out. They're gone. And we'll take it from there. But we're going to need some help to get back to where we need to be.
Yeah.
And so I think they were kind of surprised that they didn't want to take they didn't take the race bait card. They took the reality card, and that is reality. And then the other thing that they had said is what we just talked about with you. You got a better solution. Don't just give me verbiage. You got something that works. Show me that it's been working exceptionally well, like this has. We're happy to look at it.
Are you surprised the president hasn't made this point publicly about the 1.2 down to 700,000?
I actually think he's expecting others to make that point, and
Ah,
they should be doing a better job of it.
gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, and you expect, let me rephrase that. Does the president expect lawsuits to occur from all this?
Oh, there's no question. We've already seen them coming. LA, California did one that finally got overturned. They had gotten one of their activist judges to say that it was unconstitutional to utilize the guard. That just got overturned by the Supreme Court yesterday or today, I believe it was. And then, of course, DC has just announced that even though we've completed the job and the response has been exceptional, they're going to sue. That it's unconstitutional to have used the guard. And here's what I want people to understand. It's not the people of the communities that are being kept safe that are complaining, that want lawsuits. It's the elected officials who've been made to look bad because we did something
That's
that
right.
they opposed.
That's
It
right.
worked. And now because it worked, they're looking at, well, who did that? And just the way politics work, Rick, oh, well, these people were Republicans. Maybe they have some other ideas that we might ought to take a look at. And they're scared to death. The left is scared to death. They're going to lose votes. They're going to lose power over this. And that's something that they'll fight tooth and nail with to the very end.
What is your take? And if you know, what is the president's take on Gavin Newsom, who has said that, we don't need any help here in California. We don't have a crime problem. And then he raises the presence of law enforcement on the streets of California cities in the past week.
Here's the funny part, and here's my response. If Gavin were sitting next to you, you know, anybody can do a photo op, and you bring additional forces in. You get them all. You get some additional arrests done today. You quickly take a poll tomorrow that shows yes, crime went down because you made a few arrests, and then you realize that by the day after that, they're back out on the streets because your whole system is so corrupt. It puts them back on the street faster than we can capture them. I promise you, if you did that poll the third day out, it'd be just as bad, if not worse, than it was when you first took it.
Boy, that's a
So,
point.
it's you got your photo op. You recognize that what we're doing is the right thing. You're saying we don't need your outside help, which, quite frankly, we're not trying to force it on you. If you can show us that I'm willing to dedicate these, I'm willing to change my judicial system so that people who commit crimes stay in jail, people that actually commit any kind of crime. I'm talking about if they steal $100, not if it's under 1,000, we just don't pay any attention. No, if they're willing to do the right thing and you're bringing your numbers down, great. You don't need us. But unfortunately, you've had how many decades to show that? And every year it gets worse. So whatever you're doing, not only is it not working, it's making the problem worse. So you either find a different solution. We've already offered you one. This is the best. It's been proven to be very effective and working. You can't come up with anything else to do, then we're going to need to make sure the citizens are protected because obviously you don't care enough to make sure you do it yourself.
Michael Letts, 30-year law enforcement professional, someone who's in close contact with the president and the White House on an advisory level, the founder, president, CEO of Invest USA, which provide a nonprofit which provides bulletproof vests to law enforcement around the world, I should say, and also a former Olympic gold medalist in weightlifting. We thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rick. God bless you. God bless America. Look forward to better days ahead.
That's been the Amato Report. Back with more after this.